Welcome to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed. Get ready to dive into the world of nonprofits, where the nerdy passion and unstoppable dedication of those making a real impact is celebrated. Together with your host, Jarrett Ransom, the inspiring stories and game-changing strategies of nonprofit leaders will be explored. Join us to unravel the mysteries of successful fundraising, uncover the secrets to effective advocacy, and nerd out over innovative approaches to solving social challenges. Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed is your go-to podcast for no-nonsense discussions with real-life superheroes of the nonprofit sector. Get ready to unleash your inner nerdiness and discover or rediscover how to change the world together. Now let's dive in and embrace the power of our nerdy side.
Welcome back, friends. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Michael Engleson. Michael is a new connection of mine, but when I met him in Florida at a recent conference I attended, I knew I wanted to invite him on as a guest. Michael is stepping out of his full-time role of being an executive director and into the consulting world. But what I found most fascinating about my conversation with him was the unique way in which he has found a very common tool that we all have access to. It has become his go-to tool to unwind and, dare I say, even explore. Of course, I want to say thank you, huge shout out of gratitude to both Nonprofits HQ as well as Chazen & Company for being this season's sponsor. Without your support, these conversations with Michael and the other guest would not be possible. Thank you for helping to bring this critical conversation into our sector for others to benefit from as well. So without any further delay, please have a listen to Michael and his insights about navigating wellness. All right. Well, here we are for another episode, another conversation. And I, of course, always like to say it's time to get nerdy, but I am looking forward to this one because, Mike, you and I met at a conference, earlier this year. We were in Florida and you shared some things during that conference that I was like, I'm extending an invitation to you because I want you to join me for this conversation here on the episode. But before we get into what that thing was that you said, which warranted this invitation, let's just start off. First of all, I want to say welcome. Thank you for saying yes. And I want to always like to start off by saying, what are some of the names you go by? I firmly believe, that we have a lot on our plate, professional, personal, and there's a lot that falls into both of those categories. So share with the listeners, what are some of the names that you go by in your day-to-day world?
Sure. And before I do, thanks for having me, Jarrett. And that was a great teaser. I'm willing to guess that unless a listener was at that conference, they will not guess what it is that I'm going to talk about. But
Right.
so as for my my roles, it's a great exercise, which I actually do this as part of my annual planning process too. So I think about these things quite a lot. I am a dad. I am a partner to a lovely woman named Katie. I'm a dog dad. Have a wonderful 85, 90-pound golden lab with a little shepherd mixed in. I'm a brother, and I'm also, and this is really important to me, I'm a co-parent. I'm still very good friends with my ex-wife, and we have a wonderful 22-year-old, almost 22-year-old daughter. And so, all of that family piece is really important to me. And then professionally, I'm currently an executive director. I work for a nonprofit that does environmental work around lakes in Wisconsin. We have a lot of lakes in Wisconsin. I actually live in Iowa City, though. Moved here with Katie for a job that she got and work remotely, and have just started really late in 2024 a consulting business that I'm calling Good Oak Consulting, and we'll be working with nonprofit organizations on systems development and planning and things like that.
That is a full plate. So first of all, congratulations on that
Thank you.
leap into consulting. That's exciting. And also kudos to you for really honoring that co-parenting title, that co-parenting hat. I have that hat as well, right? That hangs on the rack. And now I know who I'm gonna call because it sounds like you and your ex have like figured this out, seems to be working well. So I might be, therapist and then Mike on speed dial.
Absolutely. Be happy to help.
Yeah,
The
no,
kid's
that's
an adult now, so that helps too, but
that does help. Yeah, that's fantastic. All good things. I'm also always fascinated by how many of the guests have animals and mostly pets. So that dog dad, dog mom, right? Like shows up
yep.
quite a bit. But it's very clear, Mike, you've got a lot of names, a lot of titles. Let's dive further into those hats because that sounds like a lot of hats you wear. What does that look like kind of on a, gosh, monthly, weekly, daily kind of basis?
Yeah, it is a lot. So I'm the only employee of the nonprofit that I'm working for right now because of some budget things that happened about 10 years ago. We've downsized quite a lot. And right now, so I'm kind of the jack of all trades. And we're also we represent lake organizations, local lake organizations in the state. So we're sort of an association of associations, and I help those organizations with everything from how to run meetings, how to run their organization, how to do lake related stuff. So that's kind of consultancy like already, which I think is going to help me as I move into the independent consultant. I'm also uh, a lobbyist. Hopefully, no one will hold that against me, but we do advocacy for science based water policy in Wisconsin. So I spend some amount of time working with legislators on different kind of policy based stuff. So there's every week is different and full. Put it
That
that
sounds
way.
full. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds full. And then also like working remotely for a place, an established location, right? Like that I'm sure has some challenges in and of itself. But being a sole employee, there's a lot on your plate, Mike.
Yeah. Yep. And really what I've found, it took some doing to get here, but figuring out like what the best time management, project management, productivity system. And that's kind of, I really like that kind of thing. And so I like to experiment with different systems and different pieces of software, platforms, and things like that. And so I've kind of gotten into a groove where, you know, the way I look at it, you need to have a system that works for yourself, and you have to be willing to let that be okay when that system kind of falls apart and things don't happen, because especially when you're honestly kind of overbooked, there are going to be times when things don't get done, and you just have to learn to be okay with that, and you have to build some space in there to let yourself breathe every once in a while.
Great insight. I love having when, the guests share what are those systems? What are those tools? What are the software? So, what's your secret sauce? Like, what are some of the systems that are supporting you, in handling all the things from your personal commitments, your professional commitments? What are those resources
Yeah.
you lean into?
Yeah. So I actually think that it's important to figure out like what system you're using, and most people use some sort of hybrid. So like back in the 90s, I started with the old Franklin Covey planning system, but I really and this sort of I think is a progenitor of that probably, but it's a system called Getting Things Done. It's from a book by David Allen. There's also sort of a narrowing down the focus of what you do system called essentialism by a guy named Greg McEwen, that really has been helpful and sort of gives you the freedom to say no, and that you have to choose the things that are really important and essential to get those things done. And so mix all that together, I found a piece of software called Nozbe, Nozbe. It's a lot like an Asana or a Jira or a Monday.com or something like that, but it's a little more stripped down. It's built for teams. It was originally built for individuals, but then they expanded it to teams. But it works really well because it's malleable, and it's like just sits in that right category of like not too simple, but not too many bells and whistles for me. So
Yeah. That perfect like in between, like you said, because sometimes, and I do feel like I'm an early tech adopter, but also I can get overwhelmed with all the bells and whistles, right? Like I just want something a little more simplified, a little more, this is what I need it to do. I don't need it to do all this,
yep,
extras, because that in and of itself can get overwhelming.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you find yourself getting overwhelmed or like on that cusp of burnout, even with these systems in place? Do you find yourself there's days, weeks, maybe let's, quarterly based off of, your organization schedule, your family commitments? Do you find times when you're like, this just feels like it's too much right now?
Yeah, probably weekly.
Honest. I love a good honest
maybe,
answer.
maybe daily.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, absolutely. And what one of the things that I've had to sort of design my system around is I have the problem of like when I'm overwhelmed, I tend to kind of freeze up. Like when there's so much stuff going on, it's like really hard. It becomes more and more slogging through mud, being able to actually get around things. So having sort of determined ahead of time, like these are some tasks that I can do that I can complete allows me to get going a little bit. And then sometimes it's like, all right, this is a day where I need to just go downstairs and sit on the couch and eat junk food and like not get anything done because that those days come too.
Those days come too. They really
Yeah.
do. Um, because we talked about this a little bit at the conference, but I shared a little bit about like flow state and
Mhm.
what is kind of that time of the day, I'm gonna say, where you, Mike, feel most productive. I shared at that time the conference. For me, I'm a morning person, and come 2 p.m. my time, my brain is a little, it's tired, it's making decisions slower, it's not as creative. Have you found in your own rhythm, like what is kind of that time schedule that works for you to just like cruise through your schedule?
Yeah. Definitely like mid-morning to lunchtime. I'll
Okay.
get a little bit of a pickup after lunch, but like about 3 o'clock, I just drop like a rock. And I've realized I've always been like that. I was a musician. I have music degree, and in college would have rehearsal. There would be like a standing band rehearsal at like 3:30 or something like that. And those were always so hard to concentrate on because that was definitely my downtime.
Yeah.
I pick up then again at like 9:30 p.m.
Hmm.
So I have done a lot of work at late at night that's actually extremely productive. But I
Yeah.
try to not to do as much of that so that I sleep now. But
Right. But to know that about yourself is really good. Well, let's
yes,
go
absolutely.
back. Yeah, let's go back to that overwhelm. And I love a good honest answer weekly, right? So like what are some of the
Yep.
things then that you turn to for self-care, relaxation? Like if you're starting to feel on the edge of burnout, on the edge of overwhelm, and maybe this is the teaser answer that some of us are waiting on, right? Like
I think it might be, yeah.
yeah,
Um,
drum
so
roll,
I do
please.
Yeah, I do a lot of the things that I think other people probably talk about, breathing exercises. Sometimes it's going out and just getting for a walk, sometimes like that. But we were talking when you were presenting at this conference, you asked, like, what are some things that people do? And without really thinking, I raised my hand because I had never actually thought about that I was doing this as a way to sort of decompress. But I will go on Google Maps and use the Street View feature to just virtually drive places, usually someplace scenic. Um, and I think the place that started back in the pandemic, as so many of these sorts of things did, right? Um, I was having, large stretches of, not really being able to go anywhere and tended to kind of because of that overwork maybe a little bit. And one day I thought, I've always wanted to see Yosemite, and I'm like, oh well, like I could go there with Street View, but I didn't just go to Yosemite. I started in San Francisco and was like, what would it be like to drive from San Francisco? Well, like 3 months later, I had gone, and this was straight, like, I would go at that time, I would probably do like a half an hour. But I would go for a while, stop, remember where I had stopped. I drove all the way to from there through Yosemite, over the mountains, um, through Death Valley and down to Las Vegas.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and it was a great way to just, take it's slow. It takes your minds off of everything, all the pressures that are going on. And over time, it became this thing that I wouldn't do for a half an hour or 45 minutes. It really became like I would have a 2 hour block scheduled, and I always try to schedule like 5 or 10 minutes at the end of that as decompression time.
Yeah.
And I'll pick a place and I'll just do that for a little while. Um, I tend to try to find places that have water, because I think there's a great book uh, called Blue Mind that talks about some neuroscience. It says that just having pictures of water brings helps bring calm. So driving along water, I guess, would be helpful
Ah.
too.
I
And
just
yeah, I just kind of slowly roll along through wherever it is that I am.
I just love this answer, of course, at the conference, right? Because that's not the answer I've ever received before. I receive journaling, hiking, walking, taking a bath, burning incense. I mean, there's tons of ones. This one, as I shared with you earlier, Mike, I found so much interest in it because it proves, and hopefully our listeners, are hearing this. This is not a one size fits all answer. So you've got to find that thing that soothes you, that thing that speaks to you. And I'd shared with you, my dad started doing what I refer to as armchair traveling. Similar, and he's
Mm.
elderly with some health challenges. He couldn't work, he couldn't get out and travel, certainly. And so I would just call him every day and be like, well, where did you go today, Dad? And he's like, oh, I went all these places. So I love that you do this, Mike. And again, to our listeners, find the thing that fits your needs. Because self-care, well-being, how you manage it is a personal thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. It's important in terms of like finding your planning system and your sort of all of those tools. It's like, so you'll read books and you'll listen to podcasts and watch videos and TED Talks, and people will say this is the way to do it. And it's like, everybody is different. Do the thing that works for you, because
Do the thing
that's
that works for you. Now you had
yeah.
shared too before we hit on record for this conversation that it has really become that scrolling, not fixation, but like that bit of soothing, right? Like you still
Yeah.
do this practice. It's not something that has gone away. Talk
Yeah.
to us about that and how it
Yeah.
feels that need.
Yeah. So one thing in thinking about this, since I exposed myself at the convention with this, I should probably trademark this idea now, but
I think you should. Yeah.
it actually, one thing I feel like it does is it sort of takes the place of going on social media and just scrolling endlessly through the feed, because it has that same sort of rhythm of, you got to click the mouse to advance on the road. But a couple advantages. One, this is not what Street View is necessarily designed for. So there's no algorithm that's driving you to keep doing it. And because it's not designed that way, it doesn't always work right. Like there will be a hiccup, the picture will change. Like you'll go from video that was from, or pictures that were from 2024 to like 2017. It'll change seasons all of a sudden. The camera, the stream won't work, and so it'll take you to a different place, and that kind of disrupts it, which makes it easier to exit out of it and um take the off ramp, I guess,
That's right.
back to the real world and get back to work.
Yeah.
But it does feed that sort of natural just flow that you get that I think is part of what makes scrolling through social media um, addictive and also problematic.
You're right. And I was going to ask, which you answered in your sharing, do you do it on your laptop? Do you do it on your phone? Do you do it on an iPad? Because I find myself like in that rhythm scrolling, and I feel like I could also do that arrow advancement in this street view in a very similar, cathartic,
Yeah.
therapeutic manner. And so whether it's the button of the mouse, whether it's the constant rhythm of the finger scrolling, you're right. And I now, like, having you elaborate on this, Mike, I'm certainly going to try this on to see if this fits for me. Where I do street view is when I call it window shopping for my next house, right? So I'm constantly on,
Sure.
whether it's Redfin, Zillow, any of these other housing markets, and I want to see the street view. Well, then that street view, obviously, not obviously, but sometimes will take me to like, well, what does the next block look like? And then what's the biggest industrial center around that? And so I found myself in the interwebs of these real estate apps going in that street view. But yeah, I just found this fascinating. And this exactly what Mike shared is what got him the invitation, because I was like, this is not a one size fits all, right? Like, for those of you that have listened before, Zach with Nonprofits HQ, he goes to museums and he does mostly aerospace museums, and that's his jam. That's the thing that,
Mhm.
that serves him. So I do think, Mike, you and Zach are very similar in your answers here, because they're not the traditional ones.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I'm uh, a learner. And so there's a lot of information that you get, kind of similar to window shopping. Sometimes I will use it if I know I'm going to a place.
Yeah.
I'll take some of that drive first. So it helps me know where I'm going once I get there. I recognize a few things, but
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Well, for our listeners as well, I'm really curious because, as I shared with you, we're recording this early, but it's going to come out sometime between the end of 24 and the beginning quarter of
mhm.
2025. So we're either in the thick of the holiday craze and chaos, right? Or, starting that brand new year, moving into our calendar year. And so I'm really curious, like, what are some of those additional resources that support you during these busy times?
Yeah, I find like I said, I use the software, so that helps a lot. I do a lot of reading, and so both the sort of business productivity, self-help kind of stuff, but just fiction, just another way to sort of get away, and even if it's just 5 minutes at a crack, and everything from pulp science fiction to I just restarted Anna Karenina last night, so
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I love that too, because you just gave me permission. Like, it doesn't have to be you sit down and you read chapters, plural. It could be 5 minutes. And I have to be honest, my excuse is like, I don't have time. I don't have time to do that. So why even try? I'm also curious, because you do the street view and you travel, do you personally travel as well? Like vacations? Is there something you're planning, or are all of your travels virtual?
No, I do also enjoy traveling, which I think that goes hand in foot. So um I'm also a wine enthusiast and a coffee enthusiast, I would say. So the last vacation that Katie and I took in September over Memorial or Labor Day weekend, we went to Napa and Sonoma counties in California and had some very, very, very good wines and had a really great time. And
Yeah.
actually took a trip to the coast and drove a little bit on uh, California One, which is what I'm now driving the entire length of California One on Street View.
That is so great. That is so good. Well, again, like, you have just, I'm going to say, like, open Pandora's box for so many others that are listening to this to say, okay, there are other opportunities for navigating wellness in this space, getting creative to find that thing that fits them. So you've got a lot going on, new consulting firm. Gosh, there's a lot on your plate, and I don't see any of it coming off anytime soon. But for people that are saying, I want to stay in touch with Mike, I want to know, like, where is he going next, either in real life or virtually, where can we find more information out about you, Mike?
Sure, yeah. If you're interested in the lakes organization that I run, if you're, even outside of Wisconsin and want to talk to somebody about lake policy or water policy, it's wisconsinlakes.org is our website, so you can check that out there. And the consultancy is as we record this, there is no website, but there will be by the time it drops. It's goodoakconsulting.com. And you can find me under my name on LinkedIn too, is a great way to reach out and contact me as well. And I'm happy to nerd out on Street View or any other ideas that people have for
Good.
repurposing other software applications.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And definitely do find Mike, because he's got some interesting information that he shares. I love that you're well read. You've already dropped so many titles and authors in this, brief conversation. Before we close up for today's conversation, are there any final words of wisdom or advice, Mike, that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest thing I have learned is to just kind of, like I said before, give yourself some grace, to have space to just not get things done sometimes, and find that way that works best for you to find some relaxation and get out of it. And, it'll be there when you come back to it. So
All right.
it always is.
It always is, isn't it? That is for sure. Well, thank you so much. And, I don't know, I've got somewhere to go. I think I've got to do some Street View travel real quick.
Yeah,
And
there you go. Go driving.
yeah, I got to go drive. And I think I'm going to try mine on my phone and see how that works. But Mike, you've been such a lovely guest. Again, thanks for everything you've shared with us today. So much wisdom, and best of luck on your consulting.
Thank you so much. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.